Hey guys, it's RebeccaLynOberstadt. In today's video, I'm going to be doing something a little different than what you're used to seeing. This is going to be a real chill, laid-back video, a lot of information, and I'm not doing anything else to my face. So, I have seen some talk on Instagram, I've had a couple questions on YouTube, and I've seen chat on like Facebook, especially in the Samantha March Facebook group, all about this palette. This is the At Forest Sight palette. It is the Raw Beauty Kristi palette collab with Colourpop. I know she did one very similar to this with Pure earlier in the year of 2020. And it's also very, very similar to the Anastasia Beverly Hills Subculture palette. I have owned that and I ended up selling it for different reasons. But I've seen talk about these are hard to work with, or they don't know how to get them to work, or it looks patchy, or one girl said that she put the product on and then she couldn't get it to blend out, or color would stick in certain areas and she couldn't figure out how to get that to stop. So this video is specifically for trying to get this palette to work for you instead of working super hard to get the palette to work, period. I figured I would use a couple of brushes that I'm like very familiar with and or people might also have. I have a Sigma brush here. This is the E25. I also have the E38 here, and I have another one, and as soon as I put my hands on it, the other brush is the E54. So these are the three brushes that I'm going to focus with. You have a fluffy blending brush, you have a less dense domed brush, and then this is an eyeshadow brush. So I figured everybody would have something similar to these, and I wanted to talk through how I get this palette to work for me. I'm going to be using another Colourpop palette for a mirror since this one doesn't have one. I just grabbed the one and only because it was on the counter because I just did a swatch video with it. So if this is like interesting to you, or if you have questions about getting this palette to work for you, then keep watching because that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I'm going to start off with the scariest shade. The scariest shade. Well, next to scariest. This is the Amanita shade right here. I tapped in 4 times, very lightly. Get the cat hair off my brush. And then with the brush up, what this does is it puts the product into the bristles and then knocks off anything extra. If you notice, there was a little waft of powder. So to get this product to work, I find if you tap, you place the pigment down first. Okay, now that you've got the majority of the pigment off the brush, you're then going to blend. I have nothing else on my face. Now, I have a spot right here that was my mistake. So I'm going to take the blending brush and then doing little circular motions above it and then windshield wiper motions to blend out that top line. And this brush didn't have anything on it. Now I will zoom this in editing so that you can see what it's looking like. But this little bloop mark that I had right there, you can barely see it on my eye. Now, I have found people go in super heavy-handed, and I'm going to do the other eye heavy-handed. That was really light-handed. So we're going to go back into that Amanita shade, and I'm going to go ahead and pick up the product on both sides of the brush. I'm not going to tap it off, because I'm finding with talking with some of the girls in Samantha's group that they're having problems with not knowing how much to pick up. Again, I lightly tapped my brush in the palette 4 times to get that. Normally I would do like once or twice. Now this brush is fully loaded and it's pretty bad. So I'm going to go at this like I would any other palette, not knowing how richly pigmented this product is. There is still pigment coming off the brush, just so you guys can see. Now that went a whole long way. And it does look a little darker in some areas than others. Now, going back in with the fluffy brush, you can try and blend this out. But because so much pigment was placed in that area, it's going to be harder to blend it. You can get it to shear out a little bit, but I'm going to show you something here in just a second. And I'm holding my brush up here so that I have more firmness on the brush, which will also allow the brush to blend this out a little bit more. If I want a really light hand, I go all the way down here, or I go most of the way to the end. Now, I'm going to use this brush for help. If you look, I literally had enough product to blend all the way up to my eyebrow. And I know a lot of people don't like when the product goes all the way up there. I really don't care. I do crazy eye looks. But if you look, you can still see right in here where there's a defined line on my eyelid. Right here is where you can see that line. And of course, it's still darker in my crease. So if you go in with too much product on the brush, you're going to have a hard time blending that out. Also, I have more fallout on my face down here that if I do this, you should be able to see it better because I have dark circles. But it also has blown this shadow way out, so it's way past my natural, brow. If you take this brush and try and blend down here where your crease is, you can get that to lighten up some. But this dark line here, you're going to have a hard time getting rid of because too much pigment was placed in one spot. And I'm finding that when I'm trying to explain this to people online, they're like, well, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm not real heavy-handed in my palette use, but it's like every time I go to use this palette, it seems to be too pigmented. And I'm like, well, a lot of these, the Amanita shade has an asterisk next to it, which means that it's probably a pressed pigment. And if you look, even after blending with this brush, trying to get that line up here to disappear some, I still have more darkness here and a more defined line, and right in here as well. So even trying to buff this area out, it has been difficult. This palette, I have recommended people do their eyes first and then go in with another do your eyes and then do your brows, because you can take concealer and carve this out to hide some of this blown outness here. You can also do your foundation and concealer and stuff like that to kind of hide some of this and then some of this. I'm gonna take the product off the brush really quick. If this is still a little too dark for you, go back in with your first brush. Well, the fluffy brush, this is the E38, and then just buff it. And now it's a more manageable shade. It's more of a berry color. Allergies suck. But if you look, all of this is nice and blended out now. And it's also a lot lighter. You can get this palette to be as light or as dark as you want it to be using that same shade. So I'm going to show you another way that I have found to get this palette to work for you instead of against you. I'm going to take this one here. We're going to leave this, all right? I'm going to take the Amanita shade and I'm going to tap once. There's barely any pigment on the brush. I don't know if the camera will pick it up. You can see it just ever so much. One tap, one light gonna boop. Enough to cover my entire lid. And a sheer wash of color. So let me try and take off this crazy eye. This is a Fabletics makeup removing cloth. It's actually kind of amazing. Okay, so taking this brush again, this is the E25. I'm going to color switch it. And I'm going to show you that technique over here. If you want a light hint of that color, again, going into Amanita because it's a very scary shade, it's a pressed pigment, and it's dark. One tap. And you can see the pigment on the brush. Now, if this is still too much, tap it. We're going to go back in, but we're going to start and we're going to put it down and then swipe down. Tap it and swipe down, tap it and swipe down. We're going to do it in little quick motions. So I'm going to tap and swipe going down. Now, the majority of the pigment should already be off the brush. I'm going to go ahead and blend with the same brush. Now, if you look, there's a nice sheer wash of color. It's a little bit more dark out here, and it's a little bit more like pinky color right in here. I know I can see it on the viewfinder, so hopefully the camera is picking this up. This is how you can get such a dark shade that's richly pigmented to work for you instead of against you. Not only did I use a less dense brush, this one is a lot more fluffy than this one. See how dense this brush is? Still has powder in it. But it's not quite as fluffy as this one, because this one is meant for blending. So depending on what kind of brushes that you have, I have like a BH brush here that would be really good for that. It's nice and fluffy, but it also works as like a blending brush. You can get away with doing that. If you want the color to be richly like impactful in one spot versus the other, switch it up and use a denser brush. If you want it to be more blown out, use a blending brush. If you want it more concentrated in one area but diffused, use something like this dome brush. That will allow you the ability to control just how much you do to your eye. Also, depending on how much product you pick up off the palette, depends how it's going to transfer onto the eyes. By light taps, and I'm not talking like dig your brush in your palette, I'm talking one light tap in this particular palette has enough pigment to do your entire lid, or like I did here, a light wash of color. Or you could do 4 taps to get something a little bit more like this, or you could do 4 taps on each side and get the first version of this eye. It depends on how much product you pick up, how light-handed you are, and also brush handle position. When you are looking at a brush, you have up here by where the ferrule is, this is, what connects the brush head to the actual shaft of the brush handle. If you hold it here, you're going to get the most amount of pressure on the actual bristles that you're working with. If you hold it here, which is about halfway down, you're going to have less pressure but a little bit more control, so you have something resting against your hand. Or if you do something like this with your brush, I know when I was a kid I used to write like this, and I've even written like this before. Depending on how you hold your brush or the position in which your hand is on the actual brush depends on how much control you're going to have, as well as pressure on applying the eyeshadow. If you want the lightest wash of color, again, tap once into the color, grab it at the base, grab it at the farthest point you can on the brush, because this allows for the most amount of movement and the lightest pressure on the bristles when it applies to the actual eye area. I have found if I have a shadow that is hard to work with and I really need to buff it out, I grab it here. This is where I hold it if I have a really, really stubborn spot, and I work in small little circular motions in that one spot, concentrated in that area to get the shadow to move around. I find sometimes eyeshadow bases can help, but other times they can also hinder. Don't be afraid to wipe it all off and start over, unless you're running short on time, and then there's that. Hopefully this is helpful to you guys. I know this was a whole lot of talking. My battery's been flashing at me for the past 12 minutes, so I'm surprised it hasn't died on me yet. This must be the Canon battery in the camera. Anyways, let me know if this is helpful. I can do more things like this that answer more questions, or if you have issues working with a certain type of pigment. I use the purplish maroon shade on purpose because it's kind of intimidating, unless you want me to go for the black, and then you have all kinds of issues with the glitter. But I wanted to show you easy ways to get this palette to work for you instead of against you, just by not only brush handle position, but also with how much product you pick up. and how you apply it to the eye. If you're gonna be digging into the pan, and we're gonna do one more test. 1, 2, 3, okay? Again, we're gonna tap it up so that the powder falls down inside the bristles and then extra stuff falls off. If you're gonna come in here, again, I'm holding it up close, and you come in here and you do this, and you just do the windshield wiper motions. You can also swirl your brush if you have more pigment on your brush as you're applying it. So as you're coming in, you work in little small circular motions, and then you do your windshield wiper motion. This will help you diffuse out the color at the same time as blending it. Also, don't jam your brush like this to your eye. You're gonna ruin the brush, and then of course your eye makeup's gonna look like crap. You want a little bit of movement onto the skin, but not when it's like completely flat. So if you notice that you're flattening your brushes out, I've seen people do that and it kind of just annoys the piss out of me. But tapping in 3 times, I was able to get a nice blend on it. This is a fluffier brush. It allowed me more control to blend this out. It didn't blend it out too far, but if you also look, there's pigment where it needs to be. It's sheer in the positions in which I want me to be more sheer. And it allowed me to work with the product and be a little bit more precise with it. So just a few techniques that I personally have found that work really well with this palette, especially this one here. This one is just as bad as this one when it comes to pigment and placement, and 2, 3, 4, 5 of these shades out of 9 are those pressed pigment shadows. So they're difficult to work with. If you have questions, feel free to leave them down below. I was never technically a makeup artist. I am a licensed cosmetologist. I went to school for hair, makeup, skin, and nails. So in school, we kind of worked mainly with hair, and then we did like so many hours for skincare and so many hours for nails and so many hours for esthetician stuff with makeup. And then of course, when I worked in the salon industry, I did a lot of specialty classes for... The battery finally died. I did a lot of education based on special things like special methods to remove hair off of various locations on the body. I did specialty training with the microdermabrasion machines as well as the lymphatic draining systems. I did a lot of like specialty classes for hair color and hair color mastery. So I worked mainly with skincare and hair. A lot of it was chemically based because that was just what I was interested in, and I was pretty good at it. When it came to makeup, I did like minimal stuff for like proms, weddings, homecoming, things like that, where I had a girl in rollers and I was doing her makeup while her hair was drying. You know, it's just one of those things where you kind of multitask. I've done that before, but I didn't work on clients like matching skincare or skin tones and foundation colors and stuff like that, because they just brought in what they had, and I worked on them with the majority of the products that they brought into the salon, because we personally, at some of the salons that I worked at until I worked for a private salon, we weren't allowed to bring makeup in because of sanitary issues. So they brought what they owned, we applied what they had, and we worked with the things that they had. Now, of course, I had my brush roll and I used all of my own tools, but I was using their makeup. So I never had to like worry about picking out colors and stuff like that. They brought what they wanted and we used what they had. So I never really worked with clients on this kind of like coloring. A lot of the stuff that we did was very neutral makeup, very minimal makeup, and or like glamour type makeup, where it was, again, smoky eye with a shiny lid, neutral colors basically across the board with a lot of the people that I did makeup on. So when it comes to working on clients with you know, darker colors and stuff, I never really had that in the salon unless it was like a gray color, because even black wasn't that popular back in the 2000s when I was working in the salon industry. A lot has changed in 20 years. So anyways, I'm RebeccaOberstadt. I know this is a long one. I will try and speed it up to 1.2 times so that I'm talking a little bit faster, but I wanted to show some different techniques to getting richly pigmented shades to work and or blend out. And if you're fair-skinned like I am, dark shades can be very intimidating because they look kind of scary on the eyes. And you don't have to tell me. I look like a complete mess right now, which is fine because I'm going to be getting a shower here in just a few minutes anyways. So yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions, if there's anything else that you want me to cover. Again, I never was a specific makeup artist. I was licensed to do it all. Most makeup artists here in Florida do not have to be licensed to apply makeup. But if they do anything with skincare, as far as I understand with the state laws, if they are the way that they have been for the past 20-something years, in order to do skincare, you need an esthetician's license, which takes like 240 hours, and then you take a minor state board exam that takes like 10 minutes. and then you can go and do skincare on people. So it just depends. I have 1,200 hours of training, not 240, and I have extra educational stuff on top of what I did in cosmetology school. So hopefully this is helpful. Let me know if you guys have any other questions or anything else that you want me to cover, and I will try and get that recorded. I have a long list of things to get recorded right now, and some of them have to do with hair stuff. So anyways, I'm Rebecca Oberstadt. I will see you guys in another video very soon. Have a fantastic day or night, wherever you are.